Hey, it's Brent from the White Lab Workshop. Today I'm going to show you how I made these snowflakes with scrap lumber and fun joinery. Let's dive in. I kept seeing this wooden snowflake design on Pinterest, but they all use nails and butt joints for joinery. I saw an opportunity to make something fun while hopefully learning something new in the process. I had some leftover 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch square dowels for my rustic lantern build, so I grabbed enough to make 3 different sized snowflakes. This project was a lot of trial and error, so I started by getting rough angles figured out on my pieces. I knew everything was going to be 30-degree angles in the end, but I needed to mark which direction each cut would have to go. Once I got a feel for roughly how the cuts would look, I turned the pieces to a different side to get a clean slate for more serious measuring. I started by finding the center, then it got interesting. If you're allergic to geometry, you may want to get your allergy medication ready for this next part. The little branches of snowflakes will come out 30 degrees away from perpendicular to the main branches they're attached to, which is 60 degrees from parallel to that main branch. To find where to cut the dado so that it went through the center, I started by drawing 30-degree off parallel lines through the center. I could then mark 3/8 of an inch from the center in each direction on that line, which would end up being 3/4 inch apart from each other. I could then flip the triangle over and use the 60-degree angle to draw lines through the marks and show the ultimate path of the cut. I then transferred those outer marks to the side so that I could actually see them once it's sitting on the table saw. That gave me outer edges to reference my dado stack against. Next, it was time to head to the table saw. I brought the triangle with me to reference against the rip fence. For the first angle, I put the hypotenuse of the triangle against the rip fence and matched the angle with my miter gauge. With the angle set, I swapped my blade for a 3/4 inch dado stack to match the 3/4 inch stock I was using. If you're enjoying this video, consider subscribing to the channel. We've got a lot more woodworking projects queued up, and we'd love to share them with you. For the first cuts, I raised the blade to 1/2 inch. This would remove 2/3 of the material, leaving 1/3 behind. I then set up my cut for the outer 2 pieces to make matching cuts. For the middle piece, I needed to remove only the material left behind on the outer pieces. So I unplugged the saw and found the right height by touch. After plugging the saw back in, I made the first cut. A test fit showed I needed to remove slightly more material, so I raised the blade a touch and snuck up on that fit. With the fit worked out, I flipped the centerpiece over and cut the other side. It seemed like I should have to turn the miter gauge to do this, but that would end up with the dado angled in the wrong direction. Now it's time to see my progress. You can see I've got more work to do yet. The outer pieces actually need to have matching cuts with both angles in order to keep from interfering with each other. To get the other angles needed for this project, I actually needed to use a second triangle. The first triangle sets a perpendicular line, which I can reference with the 30-degree angle. I set the blade height back to 1/2 inch and sent both outer pieces through. Now it fits together much better. It's a pretty loose fit though, so I'll call this my prototype and try to tighten things up. Duke wasn't very impressed with all this cool geometry I was doing. With the angles all figured out, I spent some time getting my Dado stack thickness dialed in with shims off camera. Then I got to work on my final pieces. Here you can see just how loose the prototype fits together. And here's the fit of the final pieces. Nice and snug friction fit for all. Up next were the little branches. I set the miter saw to 30 degrees off of 90 by referencing the 60-degree angle against the fence. I then set up a stop block to make the cuts. The angles here made it pretty tough to hold for the cut, and I could really only hold the long side. A couple of the cuts ended up shifting after being cut free, then getting pinched between the stop block and the blade, and getting flung into the plastic behind the saw. If I were to make a bunch of these, I'd rig up a jig to hold everything together better than this, but I just made it work. To join the small branches with the main branches, I used dowels. So I enlisted the help of a shop buddy and got to work on the drill press. In order to keep everything aligned, I clamped down a 2x4 chunk to use as a fence to reference against. This allowed me to drill the holes in the main branch and then match the position of those holes in the small branches. Mostly. For the small branches, I rigged up a clamping system to hold the pieces at the proper angle while still referencing that makeshift fence. This was a bit cumbersome, but it worked well enough. Though, between the makeshift nature of the setup and the fact that I had enlisted an 8-year-old to help plunge the drill bit, we ended up with some of the holes going a little wonky. I could have taken the time to fix those few that weren't perfect, but felt that I preferred the imperfection as a reminder of who I was working with when I made this project. Memories like that will trump perfection any day. The last cutting I needed to do was to get the dowel pieces I'd be using for the joinery cut down. I pulled out my crosscut sled on my table saw and set up a stop block system. This time, I was able to have a temporary stop block that I could move for the actual cut to prevent that pinching kickback I was seeing on the miter saw. Looks good. Time for glue up. I didn't rig up any clamps for the small branches, choosing just to let friction do its thing. Any clamps I tried to apply pulled them out of place anyway. The only clamp I used was for the center joint. Here's the small one, all ready for finish. For the finish, we opted for chalk paint, so I recruited another helper to apply it. This was a fun project to figure out and execute on. I was able to recruit the help of almost all my kids during the course of the project, and we're really happy with the results. If you want to make some for yourself, I'll post detailed instructions on my website, whitelabworkshop.com. I'll link them in the description when they're ready to go. Let us know in the comments how we did with this one. We always appreciate the feedback. And maybe hit that thumbs up button while you're at it. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next time.